In fall 2016, I moved into half of a really old house. It was built in the 1880s, a stone's throw from the original campus of Indiana University, which is now a park filled with homeless people and drug addicts. The owners basically turned it into a weird duplex. My friend had lived in it right before I moved in, and he claimed that it was haunted. But I didn't really believe him because he was a bit of an odd guy. Anyways, the layout of the house was weird. You walked in the door and were in a living room type space, and then you kept walking and there was a doorway to a bedroom. And past that was the kitchen. No doors, only door inside the apartment was to the bathroom and one that led to the shared basement. So my first night there was uneventful. I was a little uncomfortable because I hadn't lived by myself in a long time and was just feeling lonely and on edge. I stayed up late and then eventually fell asleep, but I woke up again around 3 in the morning. Cliché, I know. What woke me up was what sounded like a group of drummers were drumming on every flat surface of the living room. It went on for a while, and I was completely terrified. It was just a cacophony of sound. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I finally gathered up the balls to get up and check on it. And as soon as I passed the threshold to the living room, it just stopped. Nothing happened the rest of the night, but I didn't get much sleep. A couple days later, a friend was visiting, and he was about to leave. We were standing by the front door next to my bookshelf, and I told him about how I was having trouble sleeping, and the story from the first night. As I was saying this, a book threw itself off the bookshelf and onto the floor 3 feet away. It had to fly past the dresser the shelf was perched and landed between the two of us. He just gave me a creeped out look and said he had to go. I don't blame him. Eventually, I asked the guy in the other half what was up, as he had lived there for 8 years. He told me that no one stayed longer than a year, and they all reported the same shit. For whatever reason, he said nothing ever happened on his side. This makes sense, but there it is. I was home alone when I was like 9 or 10. It was literally the second day my mother allowed me to just walk home from school, rather than stay at daycare. Phone rings. Voice on the other end asks for David. I tell him sorry, wrong number. As a weird but relevant aside, we got constant wrong numbers when I was a kid, because our home phone line was 1 digit off from H&R Block, tax prep service, so I had developed a sort of standard cadence to wrong number calls. It almost always went H&R Block. Sorry, wrong number. Oh, I'm sorry. That's awk. So I'm on the line, waiting for him to say, oh, I'm sorry. Instead, he starts yelling that he needs to speak to David. He knows David is there. I tell him I have 2 Uncle Davids, but neither are there. The guy starts cursing and ranting in what, in hindsight, was pretty clearly driven by meth. So I'm already pretty spooked, having never really encountered a fully crazy person in my life. And then he starts describing my house. He starts telling me that it's white with brick pillars on the green porch, red doors, and the white dog in the backyard. He concludes the call with, I know you're lying, and I'm gonna come get your ass. In the next 30 seconds, I rush to get a knife in the kitchen, call my mom, and look frantically out the front of my house. Then there's a banging kicking at the door. I screamed at a pitch I didn't realize I could, and I ran into the bathroom, only locking door, and stayed there until my mom got home. When I heard the garage door open and my mom call out for me, I started sobbing and ran out to her, knife in hand. When I got older, I found out from my mom that the Uncle David the guy was looking for was a pretty bad drug addict for years, and that's why I hardly ever saw him. I was home alone one night in middle school. I was in my room, which is right above our kitchen, and watching TV. I had already shut all of the lights off downstairs cause I was eventually going to fall asleep and didn't want to get yelled at for leaving the lights on. So I am laying in my bed. The family dog was lying next to me when I hear cabinet doors open and shut. It wasn't like they all opened at once and then shut, but more like one after another for a few seconds. I freeze and look at the dog, who perked up and looked at me. I peek out my window that overlooks our driveway and didn't see anything. Now, I didn't think anyone was in the house because while the dog was lazy AF, she was a great guard dog, and she would have responded if the door opened or whatever. So after a few seconds, the dog gets up and starts moving towards the stairs, and I decide to follow, fully confident that if anyone was down there, she would scare them. I grab my softball bat and my cell phone and follow her downstairs. As we come downstairs, I notice the lights are on in the kitchen, and I dial 911 because I know I shut the lights off prior to going upstairs. When we get in the kitchen, all the cabinet doors were open, which was obviously not how I left it. That's when I noticed that the door was still locked, so I thought whatever did this was still in the house. So I quickly ran upstairs to my parents' closet and called my parents and told them what's up. They came home and obviously didn't find anyone or any trace of anyone being in the house. We still do not know why the light was on and cabinet doors were open, but we had some other paranormal-like occurrence happen around that time, so we chalked it up to the household ghost.